Hi, this is Matt, and I'm coming to you from Schoepfle Garden, part of the Lorain County Metro Parks. And today we're going to talk a little bit about container gardening. You might be thinking about getting into gardening this year, and container gardening is a great way to sort of explore gardening on a small scale. It's great to get the kids involved, maybe for the summer project, or maybe a last-minute school project, or maybe you just like getting your hands dirty, and this is a way to do it on a smaller scale at home. So we're going to talk a little bit about container gardening. In order to do that, I asked some of our Lorain County Metro Park users to write in some questions, and I'm going to answer those questions and hopefully answer your questions as well. If you do have more questions at the end, feel free to leave them in the comment section, and we'll come back over the next couple days and answer those for you. So our first question is, what can I use for a container for Miss Pepper Potts? Well, Miss Potts, you can use practically anything for a container when it comes to container gardening. If you think about it, a backyard garden is really just a container in the backyard. The backyard is the container for the garden. But we're talking about a smaller size container when it comes to container gardening. And our containers really only need to do three things. Our container needs to hold the soil and the water in place. It needs to have some drainage at the bottom, so that way the water can flow away. And it needs to be big enough for the plant that we want to use in that container. So if it fits those three rules, we can use practically anything for a container. We can use old plastic recyclable containers or milk jugs. You could use an old aluminum pan with some holes in the bottom. You could plant an entire salad bar in here with lettuce and spinach and radishes. You could use an old wash tub, a 5-gallon bucket, or of course, you can always use pre-made pots, whether they're terracotta or plastic or whatever material, as long as they hold the soil, allow water to drain away, and are the right size for our container, for our plants. All right. Our next question is, what kind of plants can I grow in a container from Miss Rosa Budding? Okay, Rosa. Well, you can go practically anything in a container. There are just a few limits, especially when it comes to vegetables. Corn, squash, and melons don't do really well in containers. They're just too big. They require too much area, and we don't have containers that are really big enough for those. Probably even those really big sunflowers wouldn't do really well. But otherwise, it's really whatever you want to grow, from flowers to herbs to vegetables. So feel free to grow what you like, because practically anything can grow in a container. All right, our next question. Can I use dirt from my backyard in my container, from Mr. Roger Mudd? Well, Roger, the problem is with dirt from our backyard is that our dirt is made up of basically three different types of materials: sand, clay, and loam. And clay and sand don't do really well in containers. So we need something that's going to be the right consistency, the right texture for our container. So we're going to end up probably having to buy the material to put into our container, which means we're going to go to the garden center, and we're going to have about 3 different categories of materials that we can buy at the store. The first one would be potting mix or potting soil. Now the thing is, even though it has soil in the name, potting soil or potting mix does not actually contain any soil whatsoever. It's made up of just organic material like peat moss, sphagnum moss, and wood chips. And then it also has a few other ingredients in it, like wetting agents, like perlite, which is those little white dots that you see in container mixes. And most of our mixes today contain some fertilizer, which is going to be good for the first couple months of your plant. So that's what you're going to find, and this is what we're going to be buying. Now, a bag this size, one of the larger bags at the garden center, is only going to fill about 2 of these pots. So when you're buying your soil, know what size containers you're going to be using, so that way you buy enough soil to fill your pots. The other 2 types of materials that you find at the garden center that might lead you a little bit astray are what's called garden soil. And again, garden soil doesn't have soil in it. It's made up of a lot of the same things that are in potting mix or potting soil, but it's meant to give texture to an outdoor garden or landscape bed. So it's not really designed for a container. The other thing you'll find at the garden center is bags of topsoil. Now this actually has real soil in it, which means minerals, rocks, air, water, and organic material. The problem, again, it doesn't have the texture and the consistency that our potting mix or potting soil does. Potting mix and potting soil is very light, very fluffy, and has a texture that will allow water and air to get to the roots of our plant that we're using. So we're going to want to stick to our potting mix as we go forward. It's going to be the best way as we move through our container gardening. Our next question is, do I just dump the soil into the pot to get started, from Mandy Quick? Well, Mandy, I want you to slow down and take a little time here. The first thing we want to do with our container is to clean it with a 10% bleach solution, so that way we don't bring anything to the plant that might harm it as it continues to grow in our container. So that's the first thing. The next thing is we want to make sure we have the right location for our container. So we're going to find that sunny location that gets at least 6 to 8 hours of sun every day. We might want to place it there because once we fill it with the potting soil, it is going to get heavy. So we want to be careful with that when you start choosing your location. The other thing, of course, when we choose our location is we want to make sure as the excess water drains away from our pot that it has a place to go. Now you might want to put another container under our pot so that way it catches the water so it doesn't run off onto your wood deck or onto your patio or onto the sidewalk or puddles. So you want to be very careful with that. And the last thing we want to do with our container is put maybe some material in the bottom to provide some excess drainage. Now if you have a light pot and you're afraid of it tipping over, you might want to use gravel, but I like to use something that's going to break down in my compost pile. So I like to use paper or newspaper or maybe shredded cardboard, and those materials will provide some drainage at the bottom, but also allow the water to flow away without slowing it down. And then we can add our potting mix in. We want to fill it up to about 1 inch below the rim, so that way there's room for our water as we water. And then once we have the soil in there about 1 inch from the top, we can plant our plant or our seeds. So we'll be ready to go with that. All right. Which sort of leads us to our next question. Is it better to use seeds or seedlings, from Darren Farmer? Well, Darren, that choice is really up to you. Seeds provide you a lot of variety. There might be 20 or 30 varieties of seeds at the garden center where there might only be 5 or 6 varieties of seedlings. So it gives you a lot more variety. Seeds are also cheaper to use. Now the other thing though, of course, is that our seedling is already growing and we know that it's going to grow. Seeds can be sometimes a little less predictable, so we want to be careful when we use seeds. But really the choice is up to you. You just have to find the right product for you as you go through. Now the other thing though, we want to make sure as we are buying our product that it is going to be the right product for our container. And a lot of our seed packets on the back provide a lot of information. We have on the back of some of our seed packets will tell you that it's container friendly and even tell you the right size of pot to grow it in. Or it will tell you the right spacing, how many plants, how far apart the plants need to be, so you will space them out into the pot. Tomatoes are one of those products that will tell you that they are good for the container. You might want, when you're looking at tomatoes, you might look for bush tomatoes or patio tomatoes, or somewhere on the label where it says determinant, because that tells you that it's a smaller tomato that's going to grow very well in a small pot. So that will help you along the way. I would also possibly recommend trying both, because your seedling is about 6 to 8 weeks ahead of your seed if you're planting tomato seeds along with tomato plants. And that way, when your tomato seeds are still growing, your tomato seedling is already developed and providing you with tomatoes. And that way you might have tomatoes from July to October, which is a great thing to have, instead of just having tomatoes over a 2 to 3 week period. All right. And our next question is, so now that I've planted my container in my container garden, what do I do now for Miss Patience' wedding? Well, Miss Patience, this is going to take time, because you're going to have to water your plant almost on a daily basis. So to check that, stick your finger in the potting soil about 1 inch. It'll tell you if it's too dry. If your soil is still moist, you're okay. But you do want to water practically every day throughout the summer in order to keep your container with enough water in it throughout the day. The best time to water is in the morning. If you water in the heat of the day, your plant might already be wilted. It doesn't do quite as well. And the other thing to remember, of course, is to water the soil and not the plant itself. Because by watering the leaves, you might be promoting mildew or fungus, or diverting water away from the roots and outside of your container. So when you're watering, water slowly, and water the soil around the plant, not the plant itself. Well, I hope that answered some of your questions about container gardening. Again, if you have more questions, please ask them in the comments and we will get back to them. And make sure you keep track of the Lorain County Metro Parks on Facebook, on Instagram, and at LorainCountyMetroParks.com to keep up to date on all of our programs, our virtual offerings, and changes to our park district throughout the summer, so that way you're fully updated. Thanks and happy gardening.